If you're new to shadow work, there is this one foundational concept that I feel really sets a nice tone for diving into this work. Even if you're not new, I mean, this was a huge game changer for me when I first started diving into my negative patterning. And one of the things that I like to highlight on my show here, mostly my podcast, which by the way, I'm new to YouTube. Hi, people that are watching me. If you want to go check out some of the archived audios, you can check that out at Shadow Work Library, anywhere you listen to podcasts. So actually, if you're a fan of that show, this is why this is going to sound familiar, because I'm going back into the archives to bring some of that to video. So I wanted to go through the reactive and repressive manifestations of our shadows. Now, just sort of based on your conditioning, right? Like the culture you were born into, your DNA, your family, the place you were brought up in, the language that you use, we're going to have this propensity to lie somewhere on the spectrum of shame or blame or repressive or reactive manifestations of your shadow. And what that means is if you're more of a repressive person, and by the way, a lot of the things that I get for this show are inspired by The Gene Keys by Richard Rudd, who is amazing. So if you haven't picked up that book yet, definitely check it out. I'll leave a link to that in the description. So if you're more of a repressive person, it means that your manifestation of fear is turned inwards. So that can look like shame, can look like self-doubt. It can look like just questioning yourself and feeling like you're the problem when in some instances you're not. I know a big concept in shadow work, which is accurate in most instances, is this concept of projection, right? So you find yourself in a situation. How have I actively co-created my participation in this? Yes. Also, there are moments where you're fine. It's not your thing and it's somebody else's. So somebody with a repressive or this introverted manifestation of their fear vibes is going to feel like it's their fault. It's my fault before anything else, which is good in some instances, but we'll get back to that. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, and by the way, you can toggle between both in different contexts, depending on how comfortable you are with the person you're in conflict with, or just different stages of your life. But if you're in more of the reactive pattern, this is an outward expression of your fear state. So this can look like anger. It can look like blame. It can look like a victim mentality. They're both victim mentalities, but more of a you're my persecutor rather than a poor me, which a poor me could be the repressive manifestation. And that's a really tricky one. I do feel for people who have this more extroverted manifestation of their shadows, because the repressive people, it's introverted, right? It happens in our heads, it happens in our bodies, and that turns into cancer and all kinds of diseases, and it eventually explodes into something that, unwell. Whether that's physical ailments or actual explosions of emotion that come out when people are least expecting it. But often the repressive people are seen as nice people because they don't get mad, they don't blame. And nice, that's a problem, right? But it's societally better than the angry person. So that was really interesting for me to understand, because as a repressive person, or rather having the repressive pattern, which I think is an important declination, is that the right word? An important distinction, because we aren't a type of person. We have patterns that are types, right? And the distinction there is, if I identify myself as a repressive person, I'm going to continue to be a repressive person, when that's not how I want to identify. I want to identify as a fluid, changing, growth-minded human, not fixed in one thing or the other. So anyway, I feel like that's a different type of video. With the reactive manifestation of the shadow, you're seen as a little bit of a troublemaker, the kid that was harder to love than the repressive type, right? And usually two opposites will attract. So I often will attract a more reactive partner. That usually goes pretty well because our coping mechanisms aren't the same. Therefore, it's not a complete explosion of chaos when we're both not coping well. Or if we're both two repressive types, it's not super depressing and everything's passive aggressive. So just contemplate this. We're going to dive more and more into this as we get into some of these shows that I do around specific shadows. I will always have a repressive and a reactive manifestation of what each of these shadows look like. So again, yeah, this is just a really fun and easy way to start off with shadow work. What pattern do you tend to be in, repressive or reactive? I do want to mention one more thing before I sign off, and this is a big one that I had to go back and add in here. I'd mentioned that the repressive people are seen as nice and the reactive people are seen as harder to love. It is so important, I think, for all of our well-being and compassion and just awareness around what it means to be human to understand that one is not better than the other. And we really need to give more compassion and greater love for the reactive types, because I found that they require more love. They have more capacity for love. They can love even harder than most people. So just because something is not societally deemed as good does not mean that it's worse or better than the other type. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, all the compassion to the reactive types out there. And I've been exploring my reactivity as well. It's been an interesting ride. But like angry people, it's good to go. Anger is an emotion. We can do it in healthier ways, but just know that when we have that pattern of reactivity and an outward extroverted manifestation, that is nothing to be judged in terms of being morally worse than being repressive and keeping everything inside, because that repressive person is just angry, but inside, right? So you can see that it's an amoral situation. It's a non-issue. It's just, what type of pattern do you have? And I would say the call to action here, if you were to take away anything in terms of something tangible to go out into the world with, would be when you're vibing low and you're getting this little bit of a red flag of some kind of emotion that's attached to something that you feel doesn't really need to be processed. It's just passing through. Am I blaming myself? Am I blaming someone else? Rather, am I shaming myself? Am I blaming someone else? And just noticing. No need to change your patterns at this point. Just notice. I'm going to throw in one more shadow work concept really quick, which does deserve more time. But since we're just on the topic of beginners, cultivate pauses. Another Richard Rudd knowledge bomb right there. You don't need to fix yourself right now. You don't ever really need to fix yourself. There may be patterns that you would like to rewire in your brain, different ways of behavior that you would like to explore moving forward in life, but there is nothing to be fixed. We are all divine beings with memory problems. I got that from my teacher, Daniel Raphael. Sorry, Daniel, I almost forgot your name. We're all divine beings with memory problems. And so in order to get our memory back, to remember how perfect we are, it just takes moments of stillness, especially when we're triggered, especially when we start to see red, we start to go inward, we start to go outward. Just pause and notice it. And you can still make a choice to go inward or outward, but often those pauses will get longer and longer. And then that conscious choice to behave differently turns into a thinking differently, turns into eventually emotionally just being different. And that's how patterns really start to dissipate, how shadow patterns start to dissipate. All right, thanks for listening. If you liked this, please do subscribe. I may have already said that. I haven't really gotten my process down for making videos yet, but I hope it wasn't too podcasty. All right, so that's it for this really short intro video into shadow work. If you're enjoying this or you get any questions, just comment into the comment section. Sorry, this YouTube lingo is like still weird. And I will respond back as soon as I can. And thanks for listening.